What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another video. I hope you're all doing very, very well. I want to do a video talking about Path of Exile 2 today. This is going to be obviously different from what I normally do, but I want to talk about the difference between Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile 1 and the way that they handle their campaign and the way that Diablo 4 handles its campaign, and how I think that this is a massive difference and distinction that not a lot of people are really talking about. And this is why I think Path of Exile 2 is going to be so much better than Diablo 4. And I think that there's a lot of other factors that other people have talked about, but this in particular ties into the end game as well. So it's the campaign plus the end game, and why those two factors are a massive deal for how the player feels about the game as they progress through, and why it makes a game like Diablo 4 feel really stale and feel like it kind of has no end game by the time you get there. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Let me just start with Path of Exile 1 really quickly and talk about how the campaign kind of feels compared to Diablo 4. We'll touch on PoE 2 as well in a second. First of all, in Path of Exile, you go through the campaign linearly, right? All through the acts, and then you get to the end, and then you start the mapping experience. There is a distinction between the campaign and the end game. They're not close at all. They are very separate and distinct, and they do, they give you different activities to engage in when you're doing it. In order to make the campaign less boring, GGG has actually in recent years introduced some league mechanics that they've just thrown into different zones to make it kind of more exciting, to spice it up a little bit. Because a lot of us at this point, if you've played PoE for a while, you've done the campaign hundreds or thousands of times, and you might think that's automatically going to be really boring. And it can be boring, except that GGG has made big efforts to make it not boring. And there's kind of this interesting thing that goes on where, like, the more you do the campaign, the more times you try it, the more you try and optimize it and make it like more efficient. And that's kind of cool in and of itself. But they've added things like to the ledge, they added or the climb, sorry, they added a Legion event, right? Which kind of spiced it up. There's the Dweller of the Deep became like an essence, right? This all happened like a year ago or something, or even longer. I can't remember. But for those of us who have done the campaign a bunch of times, it was a nice little like spice to keep things fresh in the campaign. Also, every single league in Path of Exile, there is a new mechanic that gets introduced. And then as you're progressing through the campaign, you interact with that mechanic, which makes it a bit of a different experience than what you had last time. Why is this important? It's important that how the player feels while they're going through the campaign. That's actually really important. And in Diablo 4, for example, there is no distinction between the campaign and the end game because you start in adventure mode. Diablo 4 made the horrible choice, in my opinion, of once you've done the campaign once, you don't have to do it ever again. You can just go straight into adventure mode. And I think that they actually it was a big disservice to their game that they did that, because it meant that you don't interact with the campaign ever again. And there is also no distinction between the activities that you're doing while leveling up and the activities that you're doing in endgame. In Path of Exile, there is a distinction between those activities, right? You do some of the league mechanics a little bit. You get a taste for them while you're leveling up, right? In like Act 4, you get Nico. He comes huffing out of the tunnel, and you can go do Delve. In Act 6, you could do Expedition. Act 7 has Alva that gets introduced. There's a bunch of really interesting mechanics, but you only get a small taste of them while in the campaign. And then once you get to Endgame, you can choose in Path of Exile which you want to specialize in, which is, again, something that D4 really doesn't have. So there's a serious distinction there between the campaign in Path of Exile and the end game. As I said, the end game activities in Diablo 4 are really not that distinguished from the early game activities you do while leveling. I'm leveling right now. I have a character, I'm level 40 or something, right? So in Diablo 4, what can I do? I can do strongholds. I can do hell tides. I can do whisper caches, okay? I can do the infernal hordes down here somewhere. There's an infernal hordes thing somewhere. I don't even know where it is, but maybe I can't do it right now. But these things are available. There's dungeons that are available, right? And they become nightmare dungeons later, but like, it's not that different. The leveling experience I have in Diablo 4 is so similar to the end game experience in Diablo 4 that it starts to become really bland. And if I've already spent 5-6 hours, let's say, leveling up a character Depends how long it takes for you. Let's say you don't have all week to play. If it takes you like 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 hours to level up, then you get to the end game and you do the exact same activities that you were just doing for 5, 6, 10 hours. That's really boring. You're going to be bored. And that is why I think the end game experience in Diablo 4 feels like it's a lot more boring compared to something like Path of Exile or what's going to be happening in Path of Exile 2, which we'll get to in a second. But even the seasonal events that come in, the seasonal events are available right away in adventure mode for Diablo 4, and you can just jump in and start doing them, right? So that lack of distinction in Diablo 4, I think, is a huge problem. And what they could have done was allowed it so that you forced you to do the campaign, because actually, if you guys ever did the campaign in Diablo 4, which we all probably did it once, right? It was actually really good. It had some really great moments in it where I was like, oh, damn, here's like a cool cutscene or a really good boss fight like Astaroth or the Andariel boss fight. Even interesting differences like the desert escort quest. I know it had, remember there was the big storm in the desert and you had to escort that camel? Like, I know people hate escort quests, but that camel escort quest was hilarious. The camel was constantly stopping for no reason, and then you get attacked by a bunch of mobs, and like the whole dialogue and like lore in that little area was hilarious and memorable to me as a player. Nowadays, you don't do the campaign anymore. You're just doing adventure mode, and nothing is like memorable or interesting. You just know that you have to go do this dungeon to get this, like, you have to unlock a legendary power. I'm going to go do my whisper caches so I can get a bunch of rewards and make sure I'm getting like gold and upgrades and stuff. And then, oh, I'm going to come over here and do the seasonal thing because I have to do the seasonal thing. And like, it's just, to me, they made this like a big open season. You can do whatever you want. But the reality is that lacking the difference between a campaign and an end game really hurts your player base, because I think the campaign in Diablo 4 had some incredibly memorable moments and some incredible characters that you would remember, and getting to interact with those every season would be kind of fun. But you don't get to do that anymore. And that is a huge shame, in my opinion. Imagine if you could really customize your end game so that you had like a bossing build. And again, the Atlas passive tree in Path of Exile is a great example of this, where you can focus on bossing. You can't do that in this game, where you can have a build that's like single target focused and you just go farm the splinters to go kill the bosses in D4, and then boom, you're getting a whole bunch of extra rewards because you've invested a bunch of points into some tree. However they want to do it, they could do it that way. You could have a like a mass farming build, like a Helltide build, where you just run and do Helltides and you're killing hordes of monsters. You could have a Whisper Cache build. Like, I don't know, they could do that, but they don't. And so a lot of the things just feel bland, and they kind of melt into the same melting pot, if that makes sense. For Path of Exile 2, I'm really glad that GGG is going in a better direction. So now we have Path of Exile 2. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. The early access is happening December 6th, I think, right? What's the big difference here for Path of Exile 2, and why is it going to be better than D4? And I think, first of all, you have to do the campaign, which again automatically creates a difference between the campaign and the end game, which is great for players. I think that's a really, really good bonus. It just gives you that hit of dopamine. It gives you that excitement once you unlock a new feature that just doesn't exist in D4 in the same way, right? So, first of all, there's going to be like random stuff happening throughout the campaign. They've talked about there being random like secrets you can find. There's going to be random merchants that you might kind of stumble across that have stuff you can buy, which is really cool. And then, of course, there's the tons of unique bosses that they've talked about, over 100 in the game, which is quite cool. That is an awesome distinction. There isn't that many bosses in D4, that's for sure. And so if you enjoy killing bosses, then there you go. A huge distinction in the game is going to be this mapping system we'll get to later, but the Ascendancy trials in particular are going to be really good. And the Trials of Ascendancy mark a brand new thing that happens in the game that's different than the campaign and is different than the end game. And all of a sudden, boom, you unlock this Trial of Ascendancy. Okay, I'm going to go do that now. I'm going to stop the campaign for now because it's got this really, really powerful reward for me that I really want to get. I want to make sure that I get this Ascendancy unlock because it's so strong. I mean, you have to do it, obviously, to be powerful enough, but it just creates a moment for the player that feels different than if you were just continuing to play the campaign. And it certainly feels different than if you were just doing another Whisper Cache, right, at level 10, and another Whisper Cache at level 20, and another Whisper Cache in the end game, because you have to keep doing Whisper Caches. This marks a distinct difference in the game. and it's going to have a different trial, of course, that you're going to have to go do, and you can choose which ones you want to do now in Path of Exile 2, which is an amazing feature, because most people didn't really love the original Labyrinth from Path of Exile 1. It's not the most enjoyable thing, but you do it because you want to get your Trial of Ascendancy, right, of course, or you want to get your Ascendancy nodes unlocked. So I think in PoE 2, they're taking a really good approach to that. And again, it marks kind of a third chunk of the game that distracts you from just the regular grind that's going on, okay? That's awesome. Of course, there's mechanics like the shrines coming back. There's strong boxes coming back to sort of mix it up a little bit. And then there's essences coming back. Essences are going to give you this amazing meta crafting thing that's going on. Essences and ritual, it looks like, with the omens are going to have really, really cool meta crafting that you can do, which again is distinct from D4. The crafting system in D4 is fine, but it's basically just like add a random affix, hope you get the right one. If you didn't get it, just try again, try again, try again. There's no like, the crafting is just non-existent in that way. But again, just sticking to like endgame or campaign, ascension, endgame, that's what the cadence is going to be for Path of Exile 2, and it's going to break up that gameplay for you, and that is important. The way the player feels about the game when they're playing it, the way they feel about the grind, you have to break it up for everybody. You got to break it up, make it a little bit more interesting, make it a little bit different, so that we forget that we're just doing the exact same grind over and over again, because it's going to feel different. That's what you need in these kinds of games. Action RPGs in general are so grindy, and if you don't make the distinction between, if you don't break it up for players, it just makes the experience awful. And that is the biggest problem with D4. It's all just one linear grind that feels the same whenever you're doing it, basically. And in Path of Exile 2, you've got the distinction there. This is another huge difference here. The Atlas Passage Tree, it exists in PoE 1. It's going to exist in PoE 2. When you get to the end game of Diablo 4, you don't have like a tree that you can put points into to make your end game experience specific to you. And yours will be different from somebody else's, and that'll be different from somebody else's, right? This guy's going into Breach. This guy's going into Delirium. This guy wants Ritual. That's so cool, right? That makes the endgame experience, once again, it creates another little moment where your brain can go, okay, I get to make a choice here. I get to do something different than somebody else. This is what I really want to try this league. That's a very cool experience for players. It makes that difference. It makes all the difference in terms of how the player feels about the game that they're playing. Rather than just being like, I did Whisper Caches at level 10, I have to do another Whisper Cache at level 70 because I'm low on mats, I'm low on gold. I have to go run the pit again because I have to go upgrade my thing again. It's like, what if you could actually invest into the pit or into like strongholds in Diablo 4? Strongholds are like not even a thing anymore. Imagine if there was a whole tree where you could invest in strongholds and your entire end game like experience from Diablo 4 is just stronghold hunting. And you would go there and you could get all kinds of cool rewards out of strongholds. Maybe a specific reward. Imagine that. A new piece of gear, like a cloak or something. I don't know. I'm obviously just spitballing there. But the point is, imagine if D4 took a similar approach to Path of Exile and made everybody's endgame experience different and distinct from one another. That would be really cool. I think this is why Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 is going to have the edge over D4 in terms of the player experience. The endgame for Path of Exile 2, just right now as it stands, it's going to expand, but you can do the Trials of Ascendancy again, and they'll drop soul cores, which are like socketable runes, so you can go hunt soul cores over there. You could do Breach, which drops catalysts and rings, and you can upgrade your rings and make the best ring in the game for your characters. You can go hunt rings. Ritual has the omens, which gives you specific meta crafting. Essence is the same way, different kind of meta crafting, but you could choose which one you wanted to do if you wanted to do one of those. You don't have to do either of them. Expedition has like Rog crafting and Gwenin gambling and all the expedition stuff. You could just go do that if you wanted to and get all your items that way. There's shrines and strong boxes. Each of the core mechanics like Ritual, Delirium, Expedition, Breach, and the Trials, they all have endgame bosses that you can go hunt with unique items. I forgot to even mention Delirium. Delirium has the Anointment enchants that happened from in Path of Exile 1, but now it's obviously been shifted to Delirium. So there's reasons to go hunt all those different mechanics, but you don't have to do them in the same way that in Diablo 4, you have to do mechanics like upgrading your Paragon glyphs. You must upgrade your Paragon glyphs. You don't have to go do expedition and do rod crafting and stuff. You can if you want to. You don't have to get a breach ring. You could find another ring that's probably close to being just as good. You could find that from doing expedition. You could find it in delirium, like whatever, right? All these mechanics are choices that you get to make. And that is, in my opinion, really the best way for them to make this game, the best way for them to like craft this game, so to speak, so that the players have choice, the players have agency over their end game. And I just think that GGG really understands how to give the players the best experience when it comes to campaign, Trials of Ascendancy, end game, and then the end game like branches off into like 100 different things that you can go do on your own. Whereas Diablo 4 is just like, I'm doing the same mechanics that I've been doing this entire time, the entire way through. And to me, there's a clear choice in what's better for player experience. And I would love to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about that. I just think this is something that not a lot of people are making the distinction on. The reason that the end game in D4 feels so stale is because you've already been doing it for 10 hours or 15 hours. And the reason that the end game in Path of Exile 2 is going to feel so much better for players, besides all the other reasons, one of the reasons is because you've just spent 20 hours inside of a campaign and you haven't even seen the mapping system yet. And then you unlock it and you're like, boom. And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to start exploring. There's all kinds of things I want to go get to. I'm going to go farm a specific map. I'm going to go find some mechanics to go do. Like, you get to start doing this whole new game and it unlocks and it just creates a better player experience, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you so much again for watching. I love y'all. I'll see you in the next one.